You are now listening to Femme Podcast with Tessa Markle
and Carolina Alvarez.
Femme.
Hi, Femme. Guys,
Hi.
we are... Hey, Tessa says hi, in case you didn't catch that. Yeah, she's on the podcast with me. She just only intros almost every episode we ever have.
She makes me. She overworks me.
I really do. She gets no pay, no residuals. I mean, I just keep her in that little voice box, and she just has to do all the
My little voice box, she means my studio apartment.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a little box.
So I'm going to do the best to intro this without butchering it, but we are very excited for you guys to tune into this episode with the ladies from Hags Podcast. They're the hosts with Miss Nicole Wyland, Riley Rose Critchlow, and Alex Reeves. But today on the show, we're just having Nicole and Riley speak with us. Their mission statement, which we really felt aligned to as well, is that they started out with their very first episode in 2017, and their mission again is to deconstruct and demystify the way society values women. They began their journey on Hags by examining adjectives that are commonly used to describe women and the problematic ways in which they're interpreted, appropriated, diminished, or weaponized. Riley and Nicole met on a hit web show and have been creating feminist content together. And then in 2016, they co-produced a gender-bending parody series called Get Bent. Guys, it's hilarious. We go into what they did there, and it really highlights the way women are portrayed in Hollywood by putting women in men's roles and vice versa. And they do a great way of showcasing that. So we get into that, their history there. And then in the spring of 2017, Riley and Nicole teamed up with director and head of Point of Blue Studios, Alex Reeves, to create Hags Podcast. So they have a history together working on these projects. And I think they really bring up important topics on their show. So we're excited to delve into that, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Girl, have you listened to Hags yet?
Oh my God, yes. Let's tell the fam about it.
So, Hags is a weekly podcast dedicated to deconstructing and demystifying how society values gender by asking key questions like, for the love of God, why?
Yep. And each episode begins by celebrating a boss-ass bitch from throughout history before tackling our ever-changing understanding of modern intersectional feminism through history, pop culture, current events, personal anecdotes, and embarrassing childhood stories.
Co-hosts Riley Rose Critchlow and Nicole Wyland are frequently joined by special guests like Gates McFadden, Troyan Belisario, Gina Susanna, Liz Jenkins, Brianna Cuoco, Ione Butler, Jazz Thornton, and Jen Mora from Voices of Hope, and many more.
The show is produced by Alex Reeves and Point of Blue Studios.
Follow them across the social medias at Hags Podcast for more.
So, Femme, we have some more fantastic guests for you today. Today, we have two guests at once. These are the hosts of the podcast Hags, which I highly recommend. It is hilarious, but also very poignant. They really attack important issues. I mean, I listen every time a new episode comes out, immediately. So, individually, they are Nicole Wyland and Riley Rose Critchlow, and we will get into their film careers and everything a little bit in more detail, but they are both, talented film people in their own right, besides just podcast hosts as well. So they've got a lot going on. And I have to mention, for you friends and family listening from back home in southwestern Pennsylvania, Nicole is from the lovely small town of 84, right outside of Washpa. Y'all know where that is. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So I guess let's... Oh, sorry, Carolina. Go ahead.
No, I was just love that, it's great to have fellow podcasters on as well who have started, a show from the ground up. I love that it is a unique and like well-researched show. Like you guys really go into history, and that's what I mean, like research, like you guys like go into the topics. And so I definitely feel like Tessa, I'm sure you're going to lead it this way. Like I want to hear, tell our audience like how you got your show started and like go into more about what it's about, because I just feel like it's, we started and we love talking about how we started. So like, I'm excited to hear how you guys formed and why you two even partnered, like that's always fun too. Cause Tessa and I have a unique story too. So like, yeah, please indulge us.
Riley, you're the one who started it.
It's all your fault.
All my fault. Well, Nicole and I started working together. We met on set on a web series called Video Game High School, where we were we actually didn't have a lot of stuff together because we were like, it's about a high school. So we're like in different cliques in the high school. But we sort of just became friends and started hanging out. And I think we are both naturally very creatively inclined people. So speaking for myself personally, the only people that I see in my personal life, like the friends that I hang out with, we're making something. We're like we're writing together, we're creating a movie, we're podcasting together. So I think Nicole and I both kind of have that natural inclination to be like, let's make something together. So we started out, we did a couple things. We like wrote a TV show. We were doing some videos. We basically connected on our like hatred for the patriarchy and our love for creating content together.
Which is beautiful.
And
Yeah.
I mean, what a better way to connect with anybody ever.
Seriously.
I feel like you guys probably have a similar
For sure.
bond.
Absolutely. This is all sounding very relatable.
And then what we did, I guess we did Get Bent first, right?
Yeah, I think so.
That was like, yeah. We, along with Alex, who is also our co-host and producer of Hags, he talks.
Oh, we allow
He's
him
allowed
to speak.
in. That's right. He directed a piece that we conceived of, which was basically, we were getting really frustrated with how sneaky the patriarchy currently was in our world. It felt like we were being fed this narrative of like, oh, well, women have all these rights now and it's all equal and that's all behind us. And like, we've arrived, which we know is not true at all. So we were like, let's look at some popular shows that maybe feature a female lead that feel like they are an example of progress, but like aren't really. So we took an episode of New Girl and we literally like shot for shot, word for word, recreated it, but we flipped all the genders. So it was New Boy. Yeah. So the character of Jess was Jeff. And we just presented it as is with nothing additional. We tried to make it literally as much of a shot for shot recreation as we could, just to be like, how ridiculous does this look to you now that it's a man in this role? You accept this sort of like vapid, flighty shit when you're used to being like, oh, it's just a quirky manic pixie dream girl. But like when it's a dude, you're like, oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I think the most interesting thing we found from doing that project was that the main comments that were like pushback and like, ew about it were from women. Which was, to me, very surprising. So then Riley sent out this sort of really thoughtful email to a lot of important women in her life and was like, hey, what do you think about these big ideas? And then once she had a lot of answers to those, she came to me and she was like, what if we did this? And I was like, what if we did this?
I think I was like, okay, it's called Hags. That's the beginning. That was like one of the first, the first thing was like the title. And I think that the email that I sent out was asking it was like, I started to get really angry at the beauty industry around this time as well, which is a stop on anyone's feminist journey. I was like, oh, wow. Again, we're being sold this idea, specifically Dove. I'll just call them out as I love doing on our podcast. This like the Dove, like real beauty campaign, like got me going. I was mad because it was like, guess what? We featured an actor who's a size 10 instead of a size 2. Look at us be so progressive. She's still white. She's still beautiful. She's still young. Or they'll be like, she's older. She's actually in her 40s. We deserve a pat on the back. And like shit that I was just like, we see right through you. Why are we still believing this? And the thing that like the straw that broke the camel's back was that ad they did where they would like bring a woman into a room and like have her describe herself, and like a sketch artist would like draw her or whatever, and then her best friend would come in and her best friend would describe her, and they'd be like, look at the difference in these pictures, one of them is beautiful and one of them is hideous, we can't believe you think of yourself so terribly. And then they would be like 90 million women each year tweet negative things about their body. I was like, what narrative are you trying to create? How is this helping us? Like, how is this doing anything other than reminding women that we think that we're a piece of shit, and now we should think that we're a piece of shit for thinking that about ourselves? So I was like, fuck you, Dove.
Like Dove,
so
maybe address how you've contributed to that narrative before you yell at us for thinking
100%.
that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like continually perpetuate that. So anyway, our first episode of Hags was beautiful. We always pick like an adjective, and that was our very first adjective. And that email that I sent out, I had asked a bunch of different women in my life, like different ages, different occupations, different places they lived, about their thoughts on beauty, their thoughts on the biggest obstacle facing women, and like how they would like to see that change or something along those lines. And the thoughts on beauty got me really interested. So that was how our first episode sparked. But the other interesting thing was I also sent those questions out to some men afterwards. And
well researched. I knew what I was saying. There we go.
I think this would be different now if I did this again, which maybe I should. It might be interesting. But at the time, the men that answered the question about what do you think the biggest issue facing women is, you guys, I got several answers saying that the biggest issue facing women was that women were mean to each other.
Women on women crime? That's what they went with?
That was the biggest issue. There were a couple that were like the wage gap, but like...
That's interesting.
But it's interesting that you said that women were the most critical of your piece. So I think that is interesting. That and I feel like, it's funny. I mean, how much are we like hard on each other, even more so? And like, do we complain to men often about that? Like I can think about it. I'm like, love my girlfriends, but sometimes I always tell my boyfriend, I'm like, I love them, but this is what drives me insane. How maybe there is this other narrative, but that's just my initial thoughts. Cause that is really interesting. Like, are they pushing the blame back onto us is where I can see it going? Or is there there might be a problem with us ourselves and how we are holding each other back. Like, I do think that's interesting.
I do think it is something that needs to be addressed. Certainly. I mean, I think the thing that the women bumped up against and they get bent, parody. We took a super cut of one episode. Do you guys watch New Girl by chance?
I don't.
Okay. It's the episode where, Nick and Jess have just broken up. Spoilers abound. Sorry, Tessa. And Nick is using I still live with my girlfriend as an excuse to get women out of the house after one night stands. It's also the episode where Schmidt is trying to convince DC not to get a breast reduction because breasts are for everyone to enjoy. And
it's like perfect. Yeah. There were so many, it's like 3 plot points, and all 3 of them we were like, wow.
Yeah. And then Winston and Coach were doing favors for their new lady neighbors with the hope of having sex with them. That's the only reason they were helping these women. So we went ahead and flipped it. And I mean, I played Nick, Riley played Schmidt, and it's essentially me in bed with 3 different men being like, I live with my boyfriend. And then they're like, oh, and then they these cut to the door slamming. And
it's these dudes like cuddling in bed being like, let's go to the botanical garden. And Nick's like, I live with my ex-boyfriend. Yeah. And they're like, I should go. Yeah. Like stuff that you're so used to seeing the other way around. When you see it flip like that, you're like, why are we accepting this narrative of like women just being like, I can't. And like, that's like, how many women do you know who are actually like that?
0. I know 0 women.
Yeah. But it's like, it's such
I'm glad it happened because now we have, 4 years later, we're still doing Hags.
Yeah. And it's so important that you guys like created something like that to make people aware of that. You know, I think there's so many issues that people aren't even aware that they're an issue because we've just grown to accept it because that's what we're used to seeing, you know?
And because we laugh like that. We're like, yeah, that's funny. Like, that's how we just deal with everything, you know?
And there definitely were comments too from people who were like, wow, I never actually thought of this as a problematic show. I thought of this as like, oh, it's cool. It's got a female lead. She's like, has a job. She's independent, whatever. And I didn't, you know, I was willing to sort of like overlook all these other huge issues because I kind of like checked the like feminist checkbox and then like didn't look any further.
And I think in a way, like it is, I would say like Schmidt, for instance, I haven't watched every episode of every season. I mean, like it's cute and whatever, but then you do look at that and I will say like a character like Schmidt, you're like, okay, like he's obviously that douchebag, like, you know, character where you're like, yeah, you cross a lot of lines there. But I think now that when you do a scene like that, you're like, oh, there's a lot that's happening there. And what is the picture that's being painted for like Zooey Deschanel's character, you know? So
yeah, the male roles also, I'm sure Nick, you felt the same way. It was fun to play roles that were like that complicated and like flawed and ridiculous.
Right.
And the dudes playing the women on set literally were kind of standing around. They were like, I don't know, do you want to have sex with her? I don't really, should we not? Whereas like we got all this like fun comedic stuff to do because the men were written as like real complex human beings where the women were just written as the hot girl.
Yeah.
Right. And that's Cece's character. Absolutely. Like, you know, she's like token hot girl for sure. Like of that. And then Zoe's more like,
the men we had on set playing the female characters had basically no lines. I mean, we changed breast reduction to balls reduction to make it even more absurd as well, which was very good watching Riley balls over and over again. It's still online if you want to watch it. We also did the full opening credits with our very gracious friend Chase Williamson as Jeff in our case.
Really good.
Oh my God.
Very, very good stuff here. He also sings the whole song.
Nice.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. I need to see this. It sounds hilarious, but also like, wow. Wow.
That's how we feel about it too.
Yeah. Well, where can our listeners find that if they want to watch that?
That is on YouTube. It's if you look up BFT comedy, this is the sketch comedy channel that we had for a while that hosts a couple different types of like series and things on it, and Get Bent is one of them. So you can watch, I think we have 3 Get Bent videos up there. We've got the cut of New Girl, the original episode cut, so you can see what we're referencing.
Oh wow.
You have our flipped version of it. And then we had to include the full, in the flipped version, we only did like a snippet of the opening titles because it's like kind of long, but we had to include a full video of the full opening titles because it's pretty delightful.
Fair enough. Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that you reference both. I think that's like what really will, people who don't even watch the show like that, they'll be able to then see it very clearly. So I love that you did that. That's just
and that's
hysterical.
all to Riley's credit because she knew. I mean, watching ours, you're like, this is fucking absurd. And then we knew there would be pushback. And she was like, solution, supercut. Here it is. Also side by side.
There you go. Smart.
It's right there.
Yeah.
Good, Riley. You did it.
Listen, this was for sure a team effort. And I think both of us would love to do more. It was like a little bit more work and money than we expected it to be, as I'm sure all content creators know. You're like, we're going to do this fun idea. And then you're like, okay, we've spent $1,000 and it took 2 months. We're exhausted. We were planning on doing 12 of these. And so we did one. But it would be cool to do more of those because it was really interesting.
Totally.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you guys should absolutely, if time and budget allows, or, you know, you can pitch that somewhere for someone to help you produce that. I would want to see more of that.
If you're listening and you would like to help us do that, you can just send us your money and
Venmo requests are accepted at the Hags Foundation.
Actually, I will take a second. Y'all do have a Patreon if you would like to share that with our listeners.
Hags Podcast. And just look that up on Patreon, or it's patreon.com/Hags Podcast. We have all the usual weird stuff on there, super soft notebooks, weird behind the scenes, videos, and all that good weird stuff.
Yeah.
We do a monthly chat. It's
yeah.
really fun. Our monthly chat is a blast.
Yeah.
We talk about not feminism. We usually talk about like people's cats and how much of a nightmare American politics are.
Yeah.
Nice.
Perfect. Sign me up. I wanted to bring it back though, Hags. So I know Hags as my like middle school yearbook. Like I would write that for Have a Great Summer.
Have a great summer.
So talk to us more about that title. Like, what is it?
Oh yeah, it's not that version.
Didn't think
it's
so.
the old.
It's an old.
We were like, what's the worst thing that you could be considered as a woman? And it's old and ugly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thus,
which is
Hags was born.
bullshit. So yeah, we were just like, let's take a ridiculous word that's like an insult because it literally means, oh, you're an old, ugly woman. You are useless to society, essentially, which is the case in society with ageism being one of the largest and most ridiculous and untalked about aspects of feminism. I feel we should cover it more on our show personally. But yeah, that's why we're like, it's just an ugly old woman, God forbid.
Yeah. I mean, that's like me and one of my best friends, Leslie. We call each other spinsters all the time. And it's like, let's own it. We're single cat ladies. We like to watch, serial killer documentaries and go to sleep at 9 p.m. But no, yeah, totally.
And I mean, I hate to be that guy, but it went around on the internet. I'm sure we all heard the origin of the word spinster, right? We know that?
No, I don't think I have.
No, enlighten us.
It was women who did professional sewing and were rich enough that they never had to marry.
Oh.
So snaps to the spinsters out there.
All right, I'm going to own it even more now.
Be a motherfucking spinster. That's where we're going.
Love it.
Like, let's make that a Cardi B song. Let's go. Spinster. I'm here for it. Oh my gosh, that is so funny. That's like, of course, you're successful.
And of course it's a negative thing now,
yeah.
Right? I mean, because if a woman doesn't have a relationship to a man, she has to be a pariah. She has to be just the worst, awful, or just a straight up witch. And now we're going to throw you in a lake.
Right.
Or burn you.
Or we're just going to erase you. You're just invisible and you don't matter.
Right.
And we'll just like brush you off to the side.
Which is even worse because then nobody learns from it. Nothing is,
Right. And it's like, tell me, ladies, how do you feel? Like, I do feel like we are making strides in this day and age. I think we still have a long way to go, but I do think there is a more women empowerment movement happening. That's what Tessa and I are about on the show and our production company and film. We are trying to change the narrative. And I think, how do you guys feel right now in this climate? Do you feel like, women are starting to come together, or, you're getting feedback from men saying, we're still against each other and so are they, Like, where do you think we're at right now?
I think that white lady feminism has had a lot of strides. I think that intersectional feminism still needs a lot more attention and a lot more white ladies to join and be truly intersectional, where that you won't benefit from it more than other people, and you're perfectly fine with that. And I think that's where we need to go. And I think maybe a certain few have decided to start to move forward, but for others, I feel like there's a lot more performative activism happening.
I very much agree with that. I think that when we talk about this in Hags all the time, but this idea that a lot of the quote unquote feminist movement has been driven by white women who are essentially just second in line at the top of the privilege pyramid. And they're like, I'm mad, I'm not at the top. So I'm going to fight to be at the top. And once I'm at the top, I'm like, did it.
Yep.
And everyone else is like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Why have you pretended that what you were doing is fighting for equity or equality when in fact you were just trying to join the white straight men's club? And once you got in, you were like, yay, equality. And like, that is not how that works. And I really do think that it's a false narrative that women like hold each other back or are each other's problem. I think that all human beings have issues with other human beings. And of course, there are going to be conflicts between women, but that is so frequently spotlighted as like, oh, well, that's because women are this way. That's because women are gossipy. And that's because women are mean. And that's because, you know, it's just turns into this way of like othering women and oppressing them essentially. I mean, it's just, for a lot of women, it's internalized misogyny of being like, oh, I'm not like the other women. I'm a guy's girl. Or taking it as a compliment when guys are like, you're not like other girls. Like that is not a compliment. Anybody listening, big red flag. If guys are like, I usually don't get along with women, but you're different. Like run. That is not a never.
Piece of shit. 100%.
Yeah.
Piece of shit. And I feel like also the thing that happens, and we've talked about this on Hags a lot too, what white people do very specifically and white women do. They're very happy, like you said, Riley, being in second as long as there's people underneath of them, which is fucked up inherently. And then 2, they'll open the door in their job, in their life, in their whatever clique for one other person who's like different or checks a box. And then they'll quickly close that door because they're like, no, I let this one in. So I'm good, right? And you're not. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's never how it should work.
Right. Or it becomes just maintaining the status quo that you're like, well, I'm the only female executive at this company and I worked really hard to get here and I don't want to rock the boat because I want to keep my job.
Yes.
Right.
Which is fine. But also don't pretend that you are progressing anything.
Yeah.
If that's the case. If you're just like, I feel lucky to be here and all I'm going to do is just blend in as much as possible. Or be like outspoken and shitty to people around me because that's what all the men around me do. And I've learned how to emulate that. So like that works for me instead of being like, what? Okay, but what's next?
Yeah.
Like, do you want this to be progress and like what progress looks like for your industry? Hopefully not.
Right.
And if you do, and if this is your example of like, we've made it, congratulations, then like you need to step off the pedestal and like to examine your shit.
Right.
Try harder.
I mean, it goes back to the whole like performative thing. It's like, you know, we think we're doing this to be, or like to bring forth more equality and, you know, everything. But really it's like, a lot of times people are just doing it to make themselves look good and to check a box. Yeah.
And that's kind of the idea of like equality versus equity. Like, are we like, I want we should all have the same thing, which is like all well and good when you have a lot of privilege and you're like, someone above me has a little bit more privilege. I want the same thing as that white man. But if you are more focused on equity, that's the idea that everybody gets to have the same chance. So everybody gets to have the same opportunity and support. And if you already have a lot of opportunity and support, you need to be fighting for everybody else, not fighting to give yourself that extra advantage.
Yes,
definitely.
Agree.
And
yeah, if you're someone who's, you know, afraid that if someone gets a little something, that means you get less, then you're subscribing to scarcity politics. There is enough to go around. Everyone should get what they need, not what they want forever.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a common, thing that then happens because of that. And that's why people don't do more. You know, they think they're doing it, but they're not. And I think part of that plays is that the scarcity politics behind that. So I think that's really, really well put, you two, on spotlighting that. Because that could happen, you know, in our industry for sure. And it's like, let's, you know, we need to stop that. We need to keep creating and helping. Like you said, I love that you guys said that, like, you know, creating opportunities and bringing people up with you. And you're only gonna, I think it's a poor thing to think it's gonna bring you back down and you're not gonna like go. It's gonna only help you because it's a win-win, you know, and I think it's a poor mindset to think you're gonna, well, it's selfish and privileged to think you're gonna be losing in like your position. But I think, you know, we need to like not. I think we need to continue to build up and do that in every field too, obviously. But
well,
yeah, and understanding why you're doing what you're doing too. I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, diversity, I'm on board. But like, okay, why are you on board?
Yeah.
Right. And people are like, oh, because it's the right thing to do. It's the right answer. I gave you the right answer. What more do you want from me? And it's like, no, it's because you want a more fair and equitable world moving forward. It's because it's going to make your product better. It's going to make art better, which can change the world in wonderful ways. So understanding like a little, being like, okay, good. So like having a little bit more of a grasp on like why you're doing those things, then hopefully you're not just going to hire. We talked about this on our diverse episode with Christina De Leon, who's a fabulous writer and director. And she was like, I'm so sick of being like the one diverse person in the writing room, which first of all, you can't be a diverse person. Diversity depends on there being lots of different people. So you can't just be like, oh, we're all white and there's our one diverse person. That's not diversity. And she was like, yeah, then like anytime anything comes up where somebody is making, they're like, oh, well, we're going to write this piece about Black women. And they like turn to her and she's like, I'm not a Black woman. I'm just the only non-white woman in the room. Wow. And now all of a sudden I'm responsible for the narrative regarding anybody not white, which is so unfair. And there's no way that's going to be a creative, productive environment. So if you do genuinely care about and want diversity to be a part of your project, you have to actually make it a part of your project, not just be like, oh, well, yeah, we hired Susan. She's a Black woman. She's a PA. She has literally nothing to do with the creative process, but like we are going to take a bunch of pictures with her on set to make sure that you know that it's not just all white dudes that went to film school together.
That's so accurate. It hurts.
We talk about this last season in our episode with Blythe, which is actually the episode that I sent you guys. But she talks about being in the writer's room and it's like, they want to tell a story about, we'll use the same example, like a Black woman. And it's like, white men, yes, you can write a story about a Black woman. I'm not saying you can't write what you specifically aren't, but like you need to know the story that you're going to tell. And you need to get that from someone who is that.
The consultation.
Yeah, exactly. And, she said she would just run into that all the time, like whether it was a race issue, a sex issue, whatever. But it's like, people don't even think about how important that is. Like you need.
Well, she's like Latina. And so there's so many different, like I'm half Colombian and, I don't look like your typical Latina. And like what my experience of that culture is very different than someone else, So it's just you, and she's the same thing. She's like, she's probably white as me and half Colombian as well. So we're like, oh, hey, what's up? You don't meet a lot of us. And it's hard to just write for the Latin race. They were just doing it so stereotypically. And it's just like I love that you brought that up. You can't just have her, the one person, as the diverse person in the room to just speak to all of that. And you have to understand that. I'm glad that she did kind of try to bring it to their attention that it's like, no, this is wrong. Like, that's not how you can just categorize all Latina women, or Latin people, how they were doing it. So that's a really good point. And it's something we talk about on our show too, because it's like, you need, people just think having the one person to speak on it is enough. And it's like, you can't just do the token, try to bring it on. And it's like, no, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. So we need to correct that. I think that's something I still feel like in our world, in the entertainment industry especially, we need to be better at and really understand how to do that correctly. To tell a story and to like work, because we should be able to all work together. And that's the beauty of having inclusion, is to then create a better story, a better, product, whatever it is.
Yeah. And it all goes back to awareness. Like, if you take again that example of like making one person, like one Latina girl talk for all of like the multiple Latin races, it's like, well, no, that doesn't work. But the person that hired her on, maybe they genuinely didn't really get that. And that's a problem in itself. But like everybody's got to learn at some point, and now I do think that we are becoming or getting more opportunity, I will say, to become more aware of things, but it's still on people to go learn that for themselves, and I think that's the only way any of this is ever going to fix itself, if people become more aware.
I know that's also being put on actors too, that they're like, oh, it was a casting choice. They're like, this role could be any ethnicity. So we cast this Native woman, and we want to make sure that this character is like true to the Native experience. So now we're going to make the actor do the labor that we should have done with our story editors and our writers and our researchers, and instead just be like, oh, well, how would this happen in your life? And then make them do the work of it. Again, essentially just to like get your gold star and be like, did it. We are progressive.
Yeah. And like potentially harm the actor too, because now they're plumbing this actor's personal experience and also using that one person's personal experience potentially as a monolith to represent an entire race, which is insane. And also, I mean, I might be the only actor that has an issue with this, and I might be shooting myself in the foot for any job ever in the future, but let it fly. I am tired, and I say this as a writer myself, of lazy writers plumbing people's personal lives or making an entirely new show or episode off of ad libs that actors do in the moment and then claiming that they wrote it. I'm tired of going into commercial auditions or seeing other people go into these auditions and like, put a button on the end and then you see that commercial and is it you? No, but your button's on there. So like, I'm off my soapbox now. Everyone stop doing that and pay people for their time, pay them for their stories, pay them for their labor. Yeah. All of it, emotional and actual.
I think that's a huge issue because it's, and I think that they realize that they can get away with it because there are so many of us out here trying to be actors, right? And we will do anything we can to get there. And some people are so desperate, they will literally do anything they can. And it's just, they know they can get away with it. I mean, it's like the whole reason that non-union commercials are so much bigger than union commercials nowadays, or like there's so many more of them, is because actors are willing to work non-union when they really should be holding out to, get paid fairly, but they're going to take advantage of this when they know they can get away with it. Yeah.
The power dynamics also, as we go along talking about injustice within the film industry, countless cases of just nightmare power dynamics between men and women, even hear about those companies where the woman CEO is there and then she's like grabbing on people's chests, but it's cool because we're both ladies, right? And like, it's not cool. Yeah. It's never cool. Consent.
Hey everybody, I'm Chris Fafalius and I'm the producer of Krista Makes a Podcast and the host of the One Hit Thunder podcast.
And I'm Matt Kelly, host of Horror Movie Night and the producer / the head of content for the Geekscape Podcasting Network.
Between the two of us, we have, believe it or not, 25 years of podcasting experience, and we want to help you start your own podcast.
We know podcasting, and we want to share that knowledge with you.
So whether you're new to podcasting or you want some feedback on your currently active podcast, we want to help.
Or perhaps you're just overwhelmed with all of the editing work. Well, we can help you with that also.
You can contact us at info@weknowpodcasting.com for more information.
We're excited to help your podcasting dreams become a reality.
Who was it that just, was it Olivia Wilde that just had that quote or whatever about like, she has the no asshole policy, which
yes, it was amazing.
I love that. But a part of me and I didn't go like read the whole interview or watch the whole interview. I just saw like that, snippet quote, but I was like, I love that. I love that about her. But that being like the only thing that's like taken from it, it's like if it were a guy, they would have laughed and like, okay, move on. Like, that just because, she is a woman in power and she's like, I will not work with assholes. Like, I'm not going to put up with what I shouldn't put up with. That they're she has this no asshole policy, and it's just, again, it's like,
it does make a good headline. Yeah. I get that. Yeah. No, my favorite part of that interview with her was she was also talking about how she wants to break down this idea that actors should be separated from the rest of the crew. And that actors like either don't need to know what's going on or shouldn't be informed about what's going on. Which I feel, and I agree with her. She's saying like, maybe the actor would like to know why you're changing the shot or why you're switching the lens or what's happening next or why what you're doing with the lighting and how that's going to look in the camera. Like, I'm like, fuck yes, sign me up. That's incredible.
Absolutely.
But it also, that idea that actors should be kept separate, we just talked about this in one of our episodes of Hags. That's only like a stone's throw away from actors like Stanley Kubrick literally abusing their cast and being like, oh, well, I'm not going to get a genuine reaction out of you unless I traumatize you. And then I'm going to film it and it's going to be great. Yeah. Instead of trusting you as an actor to be an included part of this process, you're just completely like othering, and women mostly. I don't know if that happens as much to men, but maybe.
I mean, I think that's why Olivia Wilde's quote about having a no asshole policy was sort of like loved by many, but also like vilified and made fun of and openly mocked by others. Because if Stanley Kubrick had a no assholes policy, he'd have to throw his own ass off of his set. Like all of these like auteurs, like we've seen it going around, like this film directed by a misogynist. Like if the shoe fits, go ahead and wear it. Even directors working today who are, you know, winning Oscars and nominated for shit make actors cry, and then live for it, like brag about it.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
Yeah. Have you guys seen Black Bear with Aubrey Plaza yet?
No.
Okay, so I watched it. I got a screener for it, so I don't know if it's streaming yet or not, but it, without giving too much away, it centers around like her relationship. She's an actress and her boyfriend is the director. And yeah, he does the same thing. Like he makes her think that he's having an affair with this other woman so he can get this like reaction out of her performance. And it ends up being like this huge mind fuck, but that's the general gist of it. And yeah, you know, you see like how crazy it drives her and like just, you know, pushes her off the edge. And like, it's a real thing. Like you said, like Stanley Kubrick is a great example and he's not the only one, you know, it's wild that that exists and it's not uncommon.
Can I ask everyone a question? Yeah. How do you feel about separating the work from the problematic person who made it? How do we feel about that?
I do separate it, and I don't have a reason to justify that, like the morality behind that, to be honest. Sure. But I just know like there's so many works that I am such a big fan of and has like influenced my style, or, you know, trying to think of like a really good example, like Kevin Spacey as an actor. I absolutely love so many movies that he's done, and I like took his masterclass before masterclass was like a big thing, and I think he was a great teacher. Like I just love the way he approaches it. Terrible person. But I just felt like it was such a waste to just throw away everything that he's created. And I mean, I think absolutely people should be punished for that. If they never get a job again, that's okay too, if that's what needs to happen. But I don't think that the work itself should be punished, if that makes any sense. And that's just because I am able to separate it in my mind, and I know not everybody can, you know, so yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I've kind of run in, and it's funny. I do think about that a lot since the Me Too movement. Like a lot of shit got uncovered, and it's still like there's tons of people that are being investigated. And it's like for me, it was like Roman Polanski with Rosemary's Baby being like one of my favorite like first horror films, right? And like, but then you like it's fun to now almost criticize that with a new like outlook on who that director was too. You can like really go back and be like, see, like how can we be better now? Like telling like a narrative from someone who was not a great person, not like for a feminist or equality approach to women. Like where can we do better? So that's where I kind of like focus on that. I'm like, okay, now that I know like you're like this, and now I can revisit your work and have a different look at it, but I don't completely be like, okay, I like hate this, like I don't ever want to see that again, because I did learn from it. And I think maybe that's what we need to take from it, is just like, okay, now like, and like where can we grow and continue than just be like, okay, like fuck that. Like, because if it did make it staple, it obviously had a message there, and like where can we learn and grow from there, like as the work itself. And then if that makes sense.
Of course it does. What about you, Riley?
I think it all, to me, it depends on how it fits into your personal story. And I don't think that enough people are making that distinction to say like Kevin Spacey influenced your personal story as an artist. That's different from you devoting all of your time and energy to being like, you guys, but Kevin Spacey is amazing because he influenced my personal story. That's fine. He influenced your personal story. That's incredible. You drew inspiration from him. Maybe you still draw inspiration from him. That's fine. That's very different from being like, we shouldn't cancel him because of this, or we should be able to separate him from his work because of this. And like soapboxing about it. I think just being like, this is part of my personal story. I think we've talked about this on Hags too. Like, as a child, I listened on repeat to Bill Cosby's stand-up on a cassette tape, and it hugely influenced my like sense of comedy and of storytelling. And that in no way means that I have to say anything ever about Bill Cosby, but it also means that that's still true for me.
Absolutely.
So I think you can still hold on to The Shining being an influential movie in your life without having to do any work around Stanley Kubrick. You actively don't defend him. Maybe just shut up in those conversations. Stop saying his name. Make him less relevant instead of being like, it's a thing we constantly debate for the next 40 years. And you should also be looking for new inspiration in places that deserve it now that you know.
Exactly.
Am I like, oh, I'm going to keep watching Bill Cosby's entire back catalog for the rest of my life? No, I can still like have that memory of like, wow, I totally remember hearing that joke for the first time and being amazed that I understood how it was set up and then how it was paid off. Cool. I learned about comedy. But now I also am watching new comics and new creators and you should be constantly inspired in your life. And so the new stuff and the stuff you're currently doing, like, I don't know, don't waste your time on the old shit. And I don't mean don't rewatch The Shining or re-listen to whatever stand-up inspired you, but like what the conversations you're having and the stuff, the new things you're exploring, you do have control over that, over like how much attention you give to certain things. And I just don't think we should give them that as much attention, because eventually they are going to fade away. New, better things are going to arise from people that aren't hopefully as problematic. And we should like allow space for that.
Yeah. I like that how you said about like, it's not like separating, the person from what they did, but it's like separating that person from the work.
And how it affected you, and separating your personal story with it from it existing in the universe. You don't have to defend its entire existence for it to be true that for your story it was influential. That's fine. But you also don't have to proclaim that you're supporting its entire existence just because for your story it was influential.
I think, and that's why, I do find that in those moments, I just kind of take a step back and I'm like, well, we've all had an experience with the work to an extent. So I think that is the like an approach, at least I do see myself like following and doing. What about you, Nicole? That was a great question.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I'm still evolving on it. I mean, I have gone from fuck all of that, never again, to like, but guilty pleasure, but like, is that okay? Am I like, I've gone through all of the emotions of feeling the guilt and then like the shame and then the like,
that's so real.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm sort of landing in a similar place to you. And I'm relieved, honestly, because I was still feeling like, The Shining is my example. Like, I am a big Stephen King girl. I have been since I was 9 years old, however appropriate or inappropriate that may have been. I read his entire collection of books, and I loved that movie, even though it was quite the departure from the book, if you know anything about that.
I love his book on writing. Like, it taught me so much. Like, I loved that. It is.
Yeah.
So,
and he's like, I know that he has his heart in the right place. Like, he is trying to make a more fair and equitable world, and I can get behind that. He is terrible at writing sex scenes. Go ahead and at me about it. It's bad. It's not sexy.
You can't be good at everything.
I know,
That's
he can't,
fine.
and he's real bad at that. But I felt bad about watching that movie because I know that Shelley was so deeply abused that she like left the film industry after that. And I know that articles are just coming out about her now. And I did feel guilty, but at the same time, I want to honor the work that she did do on screen, even if it was in an abusive environment. And I was still feeling unsure about how to feel about it. And I guess I still am unsure.
And I think that's okay. Like, why do we have to make a decision about it? I think, things like that are complicated. And that's like, I've stopped putting a pressure on myself, like with having all these mixed emotions. I think that's okay. Like, you don't feel guilty about that. That would be my take. Everyone can tell me to fuck off, but I think you can absolutely change. You should always be inspired. Your learning curve on how you like feel and develop those emotions and opinions should grow and change. That's okay. So no, I feel that way about it personally.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I would say that over the 4 years that Riley and I have been doing this labor of love that is Hags.
Wait, that's wild. It actually has been 4 years.
Yeah, babe.
I did not. My brain was like, no.
Congrats. Snaps all around. No, that's huge. Congrats. Seriously. We get the work. It's a labor of love for sure.
But I would say if I went back and listened to the first episode now, I think I might be the world's most embarrassed human. Like, we routinely tell people who are like, oh, I'm going to listen. Like, don't start at the beginning. Just meet us where we are.
Yeah, there's like 200 episodes. That's too much. It took a minute to find our way, whatever. Just like, you're fine just joining in where we're at now.
But I mean, it's, we're always evolving and growing. I mean, like tying both of those conversations together, there's a meme I've been seeing floating around that's like, I don't know, it was the guy from Star Trek or something. He had like those glasses and the top one's like cancel culture. And he's like pointing with an angry face. And then the bottom one says consequence culture. And he's like, and that's the whole, like, and people just love to like black and white, good and evil things because it's easier for them to just grasp, and it's like either you are good or you are bad. But like, that's not how the world works. That's not how these issues work. That's not how our understandings of issues work. So like, I mean, consequences need to be paid, but people can learn lessons. And that goes for us too. Like, we learn and we grow and evolve.
We say it on the show too. Like, we might contradict ourselves, and that's just because we're growing on the show. We're learning new industry things, and that goes to us as being humans. Like, we try to put in our personal intakes, and this is a great episode. I'm glad we're doing this to like show like this is how we feel now, guys. Femme, spreading love and awareness, but like that's just how we feel like today, and we're gonna hopefully keep evolving and doing better, and being like a better example, because it's scary. You guys know this, so the pressures of being on a podcast platform and knowing like, okay, like these are my thoughts and opinions now going out there. And it's like, how have you guys dealt with that? Coming, knowing that your words and your thoughts and feelings are going out there. You guys seem like ballers at it, by the way. And like, I like admire everything you guys put out there. I'm like, oh geez, like, makes me want to break a sweat, but you guys do it. And it's really good. But tell me, like, how have you guys dealt with that?
You're very kind.
No, because it's scary to me.
Well, it is. I know for me, I put my conservative family on blast, like by name.
She doesn't.
And I know that they listen. And we have like open dialogues. We have like a text thread now that's actually kind of more recent because finally one of them was like, hey, we listen. And I was like, I know. I stand by it.
Yeah.
Right? Like it would be uncomfortable to say to your face, but I would still get there. Trust.
Yeah.
It was a learning curve, I would say, to realize that everything that you say lives on the internet forever when you're on a podcast. Even if you think you've taken it down, it's probably still out there somewhere.
Yeah. Somebody has saved it, and yeah.
Yeah. Somebody screenshotted it, somebody screen recorded it. And I think for me, it's made me more comfortable with myself, with who I am, with how I speak. Mm-hmm. And also more confident in my viewpoints, because I do have to think them out a little bit more than when I'm just in a casual conversation. I don't know if you feel the same, Riley.
I don't know. I think I have some condition or something where I don't actually think I exist. And like, I know, because I look at our download numbers, like I know people do listen, but I kind of just pretend. I don't know. I'm like, oh, it's whatever. Like no one's, if they're listening, like they like it. And if they don't like it anymore, they'll stop listening. And I don't know, like I literally, it's weird to me to even like hear people say my name. Sometimes I'm like, you know who I am?
Yeah.
Like literally like my good friends, like saying my name. I'm like, oh, that's right. I exist in this world. Or like somebody who like from college, I'll be like, I don't know if you remember me. And they're like, of course I remember you. And I'm like, okay, because I remember you. Like, I don't know what it is. I just don't think I like fully exist in this world. So that helps me not feel like not like trip myself out about it. And I guess I also don't feel like it's anything I wouldn't just say anytime to anyone. I don't know. I
mean, that's probably a healthy way to approach it, because, then you're not putting like the pressure on yourself and everything like that. But I relate to that a lot. I think less with the podcast. I think I probably put more pressure on myself with that. But just like in life, like when you said about like running into people from high school and like, they're like, yes, I know exactly who you are, and I've been following you on Instagram. And you're like, oh, like, I exist in your world. What? Yeah,
it's weird. I don't think it'll ever not be weird for me. It's weird.
Totally.
Here's a weird question. I experienced this and I did very poorly with it. Have you met someone who you do not know who listens to your podcast?
We have over Instagram, not like in person, but yeah, we've met a couple people that we now know because we've like built that relationship with them. But yeah, when they reached out to us, they're like, oh my God, like, we're a fan. We listen all the time. And we're like, why?
Oh. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, no, that's been the most like, that's like, I feel like the most rewarding experience when you're like a fan of someone and then they're like, oh my God, thank you for asking. I totally like, yeah, they like actually listen, and you're like, oh, yeah. Like you remember me saying that thing that I said.
But even from the other side too, it's like, I mean, like with you guys, like Nicole, we've hung out a little bit, but like we don't even know each other that well. And Riley, we've never met, but like I feel like I know the two of you so well just from listening to your podcast all the time, and like even just. It's so funny, like this, just the sound of your voice. Like when we joined the network that we're on now, we were talking to Matt Kelly, who's on a podcast that I listen to as well. And like when we did our Zoom with him, I was like, this is so trippy, like hearing your voice talking to me, like, so yeah, it's kind of weird from both sides. It's a weird world we live in with this sort of technology and entertainment.
We definitely don't listen to our own episodes anymore. I think I can speak for both of us. Yeah, we do not listen to our own episodes anymore, to the point where my mom, at one point, I was back east, this was probably like 2 years ago, in the car, put on an episode of Hags, and it took me, you guys, we were listening to it for like 5 minutes. And what I said was, eventually, I was like, this person sounds like me. And I still like, and they just started laughing, and I was like, wait. Because I literally I feel like I just go and sit in a room and talk to my friends Nicole and Alex and then never think about it again. So I'm probably going to have some big midlife crisis about this. I'm clearly just not processing.
I met a listener at a film festival. So Alex and I took our movie on this, and we were in Dubuque, Iowa.
Oh, shout out to Dubuque.
Holla. They call it I think it's like the Diamond along the Mississippi. Super cute town. They actually put us up, which is rare for a film festival. But this woman came up to me and she was like, hey, Nicole. And I was like, oh, I'm wearing a name tag. Hi, hey, hi. And then she was like, no. And she like had expectations of who I was because of the show. Mm-hmm. And I immediately missed those expectations by being awkward and bashful. And I was like, I don't know you. I'm so sorry. And you know what happened? She didn't want to talk to me for the rest of the time because I handled it so poorly. And she's so nice, and she's a really talented filmmaker, and she just like wanted to talk to me. But then it turns out, we emailed about it later, and like she also was like, I was very awkward.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's 100% about her and not you, about being like this. I tried to talk to Nicole and I did it wrong, and I need to leave and never speak to her again.
I just walked out of the bathroom and she was like, hi. And I was like, hi.
Well, that's like kudos to you though, like celebrity.
No,
you know what I mean?
Nope.
In Dubuque,
that's like what her mind was. She's like, Nicole is blown up. Like she's probably like, you're probably used to that, and she just didn't realize like you're like, no, like me, like who?
Like, no, I sit at home.
Yeah, my name's Nicole. Hi.
Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah. So I just think it's funny because it takes you a second to realize, wait, no, I actually I'm getting like people all over to listen to me, and how like that's incredible because to get to that point, to have that awkward moment, it just means like that people are seeing you in that way, like girl, get it.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I thought of it that way. I
get
still
those
just
paparazzi
feel like
shots.
red face embarrassment about it.
There's something about podcasting too that is kind of a little bubble, because they're never going to fix this at this point, but like you can't really tell how many people are listening to a podcast. I don't know if anybody listening knows that, but you can tell how many people have downloaded your episode if you're using a tracker, if your podcast is like hosted on a site. But if you're hosted somewhere and you have the ability to download, but you also have the ability to just like press a play button, we don't know how many times people have pressed that play button. So it's like you live in this weird world of just looking at numbers and being like, okay, 300 people have at least downloaded this. Maybe they downloaded it and threw it immediately in the trash. Maybe they downloaded it and listened to it 6 times in a row. Who knows? We just have no concept of like how, and it's not like YouTube where like you could read the comments but you shouldn't, but you do anyway. Like we get messages from the people who like care enough to like write us a whole email, which is incredible, but even that is like a few people. So it still is weird to think of. I sometimes compare it. I'm like, okay, if I saw this number of downloads, if I had that many people at a live show, I would be like, this is amazing. But in the podcast world, I'm just like, I don't know. This probably isn't that high compared to like other people. And like we should be getting more people. And I know they're just numbers to me.
Exactly.
It's like it's a weird like disconnect where you just see like statistics and you're like, okay.
Totally.
That is so true. And that's where it's like, then you get like a Spotify wrap up and at the end of the year and you're like, oh, so like in these countries too? What?
Yeah, it's amazing. But you're like, I don't know who these people are. Yeah. Cool.
And then the horror of seeing they've downloaded every single episode in this one country. And you're like, no, not that one. Oh.
I know. When
sometimes like a week will go by and I'll be like, we had 193 downloads on this one day. Wow, we've got 193 episodes. Who are you? And I'm so sorry you did that.
Do that.
I don't know how Apple Podcast works. I still am like grandma with it. Like, not even from the like putting my podcast out there perspective, but as a listener, I'm like, I didn't want to download all those, but then wait, how do I download this show that I'm missing these episodes? Like, I don't understand how it works. So I can only imagine to the people that are just the total casual listener, like they want to support and they don't know how, and I don't know how to tell them.
It's actually not very intuitive. Sorry. I don't hope that doesn't screw me over with
it's also just there's so many platforms. There's like, okay, if you're used to Spotify, that's great if that podcast is on Spotify, but not all podcasts are on Spotify. So like that, it's like having 1 million subscriptions to like Hulu and Netflix, and you have to, you're like a different one, like the play button is a different one on this one, and on this one you have to click and you can't skip the intro, and like you just have to learn all these different formats, and it's a lot. So if it's hard for you, I understand.
We forgive you, listeners. And
But
we can't help you,
guys,
though.
Fam, y'all need to tune in to Hags if you haven't heard enough about it already on this episode. We like 4 years, that's a long time, and like it's a lot of work, and we respect that. So again, like we're so excited, we were happy to have you guys on today, and like I think you guys are spreading important messages, and like you do the work, and I love that, like hearing your backstory, Riley, from the beginning to talk about the emails that you were doing, like things like that, and Nicole getting on your soapbox and being vulnerable, I think are just really important elements. And it is scary to do on a platform sometimes when it's like it's out there in the forever, but I think again it's important for our family and for your family to know, like it's like, and I mean in the community space, that we're humans, we need to have those conversations, and they're not going to be perfect, but we need to put in our perspective and our unique experience out there, because who knows who that's going to resonate with, and hopefully we just all learn from each other at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then let our listeners know, besides, they can listen to your podcast on all the major podcast platforms, but social media wise, can they follow Hags and also you each individually?
You can follow Hags across all social media platforms at Hags Podcast. I'm at Ms. Nicole Wyland on all of the elder millennial apps.
Does that just mean not TikTok?
Yep.
I am at Riley Ace of Spies on Instagram and at Riley Rose Critch on Twitter. I think that's when I think we're on all the platforms, but if you find one that we're not on, let us know, because each day there's something new and it's hard to keep up.
Like Clubhouse, have you guys started that? Because I have nope. I made an account and that's as far as I went.
I made Tessa make an account, and then that's my job. I did it.
As soon as I heard it was like, sit and do nothing else but talk to random people, and they can also like make you a presenter without your consent, I was like, there is no world in which I will be joining this app.
Yeah,
I'm not interested.
Guys,
but Twitter is enough for me.
Having this conversation though with your podcast community, like, and actually, because you don't know who's tuning in, getting a more personal perspective from your audience, like, okay, yeah, we feel you on that point, or maybe I need you to explain that. So I don't know, I'm just saying, maybe there's a Femme. Guys, do you want it? Do you want a Femme times Hags live podcast experience? I think I'd be down for that. If you ladies want to get on that train, I think you guys would be perfect to have like that kind of conversation with. And don't worry, Nicole, I'll just be the presenter. I'll just do everything.
Thank you.
Well, maybe that's the thing. Maybe we need to only be on the like presenter side, so we don't get caught, by surprise and like pulled up to the stage. Or whatever.
I just don't know the platform well enough.
No, I think
not be afraid of it, but I'm sure I could learn and adapt.
You can you can decline that or just make someone else a presenter. I just think they do that so that everyone can have a voice who's in the room. So like, let's say like, oh, hey, I see blah, blah, blah tuning in. Do you want to put in, your thoughts here? Let's make you a presenter for a moment. So that way people can equally share and not talk all at once. I think that's the idea with the presenter. Again, I'm not experienced at all in this, but I've tuned in because I do think, the podcasting thing has been a great, way for people to voice their opinions and like grow a community, and that's why we love it. We're such a fan, and I'm sure you guys are too. And so I'm just like, I think this is something we can definitely look to, and I see it growing in that way for us as Femme Regard. If we wanted to do a live Femme Regard kind of podcast, I think with you guys, if you want to hop on board, I think you guys would be perfect to like kind of do that with.
Yeah, it sounds like
that'd be fun.
Yeah,
scary fun.
I love it. I feel like we can just like make sure we don't like anyone will just start booing. Just kidding. No, we won't do that, fam. Be like, boo, get off. No, I'm kidding. No, and I love that if you just like want to, I mean, if we're hosting this, we shouldn't quietly leave. But yeah, for anyone who's new, who doesn't understand Clubhouse and is curious about it, you can just quietly leave too. It's not like this. You can quickly join in and quickly join out. No hard feelings. You're just popping
Irish
in and out of
goodbye
people's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I like having that option. I actually prefer to have that option.
No, that's actually how it
like-
is. Yeah. So it's actually really not that scary. I've just haven't found a community I feel like comfortable joining in yet. And that's why I'm like, well, we have ours. We might as well just start our own.
Start our own.
Yeah, just let me know. Let us know. Guys, we will definitely keep you posted if they have any exciting announcements. Ladies, you're a friend to the show. Let us know how we can always support you. If you have something special and important coming up, we definitely want to voice that to our community. So yeah.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for coming on today.
Thanks for listening to Femme Podcast. If you like what you hear, tune in every Friday for more tips on the filmmaking business and insightful conversations with industry professionals.
We can only grow with your support, so please subscribe, share, rate, and review.
You can also join the Femme Fam on Patreon. For more on us, check us out at femregard.com.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.